which is an academic discussion on the Islamic jurisprudence, Usul al-Fiqh, principle of Asalat al-Ishtighal, the principle of engagement/precaution, particularly concerning doubtful duties. The first station, doubt among mutually exclusive alternatives, mutabainin. Introduction. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. All praise belongs to God, Lord of the worlds, and peace and blessings be upon our Master, our Chief, and our Prophet, Abu al-Qasim Muhammad, and upon his pure, chaste, and infallible household, and may the curse of God be upon all their enemies, from now until the day of judgment. The first station, doubt among mutually exclusive alternatives, mutabainin. The domain of Asalat al-Ishtighal, the principle of engagement. The discussion is about Asalat al-Ishtighal, the principle of engagement/precaution. The specific case and domain for this principle is where we have knowledge of the duty, taklif, but doubt about the object of the duty, mukallaf bih. Our doubt relates to the performance of the duty, not to the existence of the duty itself. It has thus been stated that the discussion here occurs in two stages because the doubt or ambiguity regarding the object of the duty can be conceived in two ways. 1. The object of the duty is doubtful between mutually exclusive alternatives mutabainin, or distinct matters. The sides or parties to the doubt are matters that are existentially distinct. They are multiple existences and independent entities. 2. One of the alternatives is recognized as being a part of the other alternative, assuming the duty is related to the other. This is technically referred to as the lesser and the greater, akal wa akthar. Our current discussion is in the first stage, where the doubt is between mutually exclusive alternatives, mutabainin, such as the noon prayer versus the Friday prayer, or the uncertainty of wine, kamr, residing between. Or the uncertainty of wine, kamr, residing between two vessels, ain, where each vessel is an independent existence and a distinct matter. In this case, if the existence of the original duty is known, but the object of the duty is doubted, what is the obligation? Is precaution necessary? That is absolute conformance, muwafaqa kataya, obligatory or not? Assuming absolute conformance is not obligatory, is absolute violation, mukallafa kataya, forbidden, or is even absolute violation permissible? We previously discussed a part of this subject in the chapter on certainty, Kitab al-Kat, under the issue of aggregate knowledge. Ilm ijmali, does aggregate knowledge constitute a perfect cause, ilya tama, for the duty to become effective, tanjaz, or is it merely a necessary condition, mukta, for effectiveness? Or does it not even entail the condition for effectiveness? And is aggregate knowledge the same regarding the prohibition of absolute violation and the necessity of absolute conformance? Or is there a difference? Regarding the prohibition of absolute violation, it has an effect in the nature of a perfect cause, ilya. However, regarding the necessity of absolute conformance, its effect is in the nature of a necessary condition, ikti. We discussed a part of these issues within the subject of aggregate knowledge, as addressed by scholars such as Sahib al-Kafaya and the late Sheikh al-Anr, may God exalt their stations, at the end of the Kitab al-Kat. There we mentioned another kind of classification at the beginning of the Kitab al-Kat, which is beyond the scope of repetition now. After it is established that the locus of our dispute is the duty in general, meaning our dispute is not restricted to obligatory duties, wajibiyah, or prohibitive duties, tarmaya, we title the discussion, Knowledge of the Duty. Of course, the concept of duty implies a kind of inherent obligation. When we say knowledge of the duty, does it necessitate the obligation of precaution? This refers to the obligatory duty, taklif lazumi. It makes no difference whether this obligatory duty is an act of commission, wujubi, or an act of omission, tarm. Furthermore, we can go even further and say that sometimes the type of duty is not clear to us at all. Sometimes we know the duty is one of commission, obligatory, but we don't know whether the object of the duty on Friday is the Friday prayer or the noon prayer. Here, the type of duty, obligation, is specified, but the object of the duty is ambiguous, and the object of the duty is unknown to us. Or sometimes, we know the original prohibition, irma, but we don't know whether this prohibition is related to a specific act, or to another act that is mutually exclusive, mubayan, and an independent existence. Here, we mentioned that we can go even higher. Knowledge of the genus of duty, but ambiguity of the species of duty. A third assumption can be conceived here, that we know the genus of the duty, gens al-taklif, but the species of the duty, na al-taklif, is not specified. Just as the object of the duty is not specified, the species of the duty is not specified, only the genus of the duty is clear to us. For example, we know that a certain compulsory, definitive duty, taklif luzumian, exists here, but we don't know, for example, whether this compulsory duty is the obligation of the Friday prayer or the prohibition of usurpation, gab. One side involves an obligation, and the other involves a prohibition. However, this is not like the case of being suspended between two prohibitions, de Warren Bain al-Madrain. In that case, the object of prohibition and obligation was a single thing, e.g., we didn't know if the Friday prayer was obligatory or forbidden. That is a case of de Warren Bain al-Madrain and relates to Asalat al-Taqr, the principle of choice, which is another principle separate from Asalat al-Ishtighal. But the issue here is not like that. We state, either the Friday prayer is obligatory or usurpation is forbidden. We know in summary that a compulsory duty exists, but we don't know if that compulsory duty is the obligation related to the Friday prayer or the prohibition related to usurpation. This is also one of the examples of the principle of engagement, Qaidat al-Ishtighal, and one of the cases where it is applied. Similarly, in Asalat al-Ishtighal, there is no difference between the doubt being a legal doubt, shubha akmaya, or an objective doubt, shubha maya. In the example of the Friday prayer, which we mentioned first, where we have aggregate knowledge that either the Friday prayer is obligatory or the noon prayer is, the doubt is clearly a legal doubt. We don't know what the religious duty is in the era of absence. Is it the obligation of the Friday prayer or the obligation of the noon prayer? And sometimes the doubt is objective, like the uncertainty of wine, kamr, between two vessels. Here, the mistake is not regarding the religious ruling, but regarding an external matter whose specification is not the responsibility of the lawgiver, sherry, but must be discovered through other means. Is the liquid in the vessel on the right wine, or the liquid in the vessel on the left? Ultimately, these are all cases for the principle of engagement. Now we must consider, in all these cases that are the domain of the principle of engagement, does the principle of engagement necessitate that one must observe all aspects, and thus is called the principle of precaution? Does the principle of engagement and precaution apply in these cases or not? Or is there a distinction, tafel, in the matter? And finally, we must discuss, can the master, mala, grant a license for omission, tark, in some or all of the alternatives under aggregate knowledge, or can he not? Or should we also make a distinction between different cases and assumptions in this matter? The intent of knowledge of the duty in the principle of engagement. You stated that the domain of the principle of engagement is knowledge of the duty and doubt in the object of the duty. This knowledge of the duty requires some explanation, and the assumptions that can be conceived here must be considered. You have knowledge of the duty and doubt in its object. What does this knowledge of the duty mean? How are you aware of the duty, and with what characteristics is your knowledge of the duty related? Since the principle of engagement is fundamentally a purely rational principle, Qaida, akliya ma, and has no relation to tradition, the appearance of tradition, or the meaning of a verse. One must be very careful and use the standard of reason to judge whether this principle is necessitated by reason or not. We must observe with rational precision where the principle of engagement applies and where it does not, where the lawgiver can grant a license for violation, and where the lawgiver cannot grant a license for violation. In the knowledge of the duty, there is one assumption. The duty that is known to the person is a certain, serious, definite duty from the master, originating from the master's serious, definite will, irada jiddiya kataya, such that the master has absolutely no contentment with the violation of this duty, not even with the assumption of the ambiguity, unspecified nature, or lack of clarity of the object of the duty. Sometimes you acquire knowledge of such a duty, such a responsibility from the lawgiver. I recall mentioning a common example previously. Assume you know that the master absolutely forbids the killing of his son. Due to the intense love related to paternity, He is in no way pleased with his son's murder, even in a case where the identity of the son is ambiguous, even where it is not specified or clear that this one is the master's son. If you acquire knowledge of such a definite duty and such a serious will,